Welcome to today's episode of What to Say and How to Say It, the podcast to help you fix your marriage. I'm Shai Lewis. I'm here with Nina Roesner. Our mission is to help you, Christian married man or woman, navigate conflict and build connections so you can have a thriving marriage. All right, so today our topic is what to say when there are boundaries that are crashing into each other. So, all right. This is going to be fun because I think we talk a lot about boundaries, but we don't talk about how, when it happens in a healthy relationship and it can still go wrong. So I'm excited to talk about that today. And of course, Nina, always glad to see you.
Oh, glad to be here. This is a topic that, has all sorts of repercussions. And, even in healthy relationships, to your point, people run into this dysfunction, if you will, when boundaries crash together because we have different value systems, right? And then you get different circumstances. But, we'll talk a little bit too about unhealthy relationships because that's where you see the most of this crashing is when there's different levels of maturity at that moment, let's say, and they're bumping into each other. So how do you navigate that? That's where we'll go.
That's where we'll go. But before that, I want to direct our listeners to our website, greaterimpactwives.org. We have a free PDF for you there. We also have a marriage assessment for you to take to kind of see where you are and maybe hopefully direct you into some help if you're interested. I also want to mention we have a conference coming up next month. We have a few spots left. So if you are interested in just getting away and come and hang out with us, we're going to have some fun. It's always good to gather with your sisters and just really hear each other's stories and encourage each other in whatever it is you're going through. So check that out if you have time. If you're interested, join us. So let's jump into the topic. So, all right. So when you're in a situation where you have a healthy relationship, we'll just start there. We can address the unhealthy later. But let's say you're going along, things are, going well, you're setting boundaries, your person is setting their boundaries, and then suddenly you kind of hit a hiccup. I had a situation this week where this person, I've been in a relationship for a few years now. She has been a good friend. She's been a big help with me and my girls. And she and I had a specific time we wanted to meet. And um, she had a conflict on her side. I had a conflict on my side. And we could not figure it out. And the relationship, or sorry, not the relationship, but the conversation went south because we couldn't figure it out. And I think when I think about it, it was because she was tired, I was tired, there was a lot of things going on. It was just that time of the day. And the conflict escalated and escalated and escalated. And then it went to text. And then it took a few rounds before we actually found the solution. And we got there, but I was just thinking, why did it take so long? Because what she was asking for was very reasonable. What I was asking for was very reasonable. But we just couldn't hear each other. And so I think that happens a lot and for many reasons, but it kind of threw me off because it never really happened before in that situation
Mhm.
or in that relationship. And I know stuff now. So I was like, why was that so hard for me? So I don't know. Do you have any thoughts around that? I mean, has that ever happened to you where you're like caught off guard with someone that you never really have that issue with?
Oh man. Yeah, I sounds like you're buying one of the first lies that I learned I had, which was I know stuff. This
Yeah.
shouldn't be happening. Like,
Yes.
I'm supposed to be smart here. Why is this a problem? Yeah, it's a myth that when we know things, we're going to navigate everything perfectly. Like what you're dealing with, that's just normal. Things get bumpy. It's like, all right. And it's surprising how upset people get when it gets bumpy. Like
Yeah.
just and we have this too. Like I've got friends, family members that, when you're trying to navigate consensus on something, whether it's dates or which day we can get everybody together for dinner, like this, after you've had two or three conversations, somebody starts getting freaked out because, oh, this is hard. It's like, no, well, to me, it's not anymore. But I used to be like that. It's like, oh, this is becoming a struggle, and I'm going to upset somebody because it's difficult now. It's like, no, it's just you've walked through a lot of stuff that didn't work. Like, keep working at it. Don't get upset. Don't stress. There's nothing to stress here. Pretend you started here. Like that's it. Just pretend you started here and keep going. uh, it's really, really normal. And I think nobody does that. Nobody says to us, navigating win-win outcomes
Mm,
is challenging. We
mhm.
we have this myth that it's supposed to just fall into place as if all the angels and planets aligned. Like, and it just life doesn't work that way. So we got to figure this out. And I'm glad you guys sorted it.
Yeah. Yeah, I we did. And like one of the things I did say to her, I was like, you know what? This doesn't have to like end in like never speaking again. Because I was aware enough in the moment to say that because it felt like it was going in that direction. I was like, no, that's not happening.
Mhm, mhm.
Just because I think that's kind of the culture today we live in. And I think
Yeah.
that is the temptation for a lot of us, like who aren't aware of that, what you just said, win-win is possible if we can
Mhm,
just, do a little bit of work and kind of calm down a little bit.
mhm.
But yeah, I mean, we did figure it out and yeah, I think it'll be okay.
Well, the key element in here is you recognize that what she wants was reasonable
Yeah.
and what you want is reasonable. Like there's an equality of valuing yours and her desires.
Hmm.
And when we can do that, we call that a no losers policy. And I stole the phrase from, what's the guy's name? Gary Smalley, I think, Greg Smalley, somebody Smalley. Um, their book, Nine Lies That Will Destroy Your Marriage. But one of the things you work on, and we borrowed this for a marriage intensive, is that you have a no losers policy. You want to build trust with somebody. So like you just make it a non-issue. Yeah, we don't have this dance figured out. We don't have the solution nailed down or the time that everybody can meet or whatever it is. But we do know one thing, and that is that we care about each other. And we're not going to do something that's a lose for you or a lose for me. Like we're going to work this so it's a win-win for both of us. And that's a process that you have to get to. But you have to your point, you have to get past the, oh, this is difficult. And then there are people that are like, oh, if it's difficult, then, it's not supposed to be difficult. And therefore, this relationship is something, something, something. And then I'm just done. And that actually happens. And it's like, what is wrong with people that that's where they're at? Super sad. Life's been too easy. That's how that goes. I love people that have had hard times in their upbringing, that have suffered and struggled, maybe even come from, poverty into being something or, in college afterwards, like had to pull themselves up by their bootstraps because they're not babies in relationship.
Mm,
Sounds really derogatory and dismissive, and maybe it is, but it's frustrating for me and frustrating for others to deal with people that are so easily discouraged the second something gets hard, right? And we're living in a culture now where we got that everywhere like we've never had. It's crazy. America has not had that. And we're seeing it in relationships. Like I've got people that I was talking to somebody last week who was thinking about joining one of our courses, maybe doing marriage intensive and all that. And I'm like, so what's your challenge? And she's like, well, he never. And then she listed off teeny tiny little things.
mm,
And I'm like, I'm waiting for the he's got a porn addiction or he had an affair or he, bankrupted our savings or something. And it's like, no, she's upset because she'll take the garbage out of the can and ask him to take it out and he forgets. Okay. um and and then she talks for 20 minutes about how devastating that is to her and how he doesn't love her. And I'm like, oh, honey, like, wow. And it's just challenging. There's a lot of work to be done there because people have to grow up and realize what hard actually means. You know,
Yeah.
people's small imperfections because we're absent-minded and whatever. And that just comes with the territory, and it's a shame. So anyway, I'm gonna derail us if I keep going down this path. So sorry.
Well, I was just thinking about that because you're right. There is something about suffering that helps us to grow up. We realize, first of all, things actually weren't as bad as we thought they were. Uh,
Mhm.
but I also think when you haven't had a lot of suffering, you you do like that example you just used. You think it's really, really bad or whatever it is you're going through. It's a hard thing for you
Yes.
in that moment.
Yep.
Um, and there's still opportunity, right? In that to learn, to grow, to maybe do work there. And it may not be a boundary that you set, it may be understanding yourself and your expectations. And like that's the work is what I'm hearing. Is
Yeah.
that right?
Yeah. And I sound kind of judgmental, and I guess I am being judgmental about where that person's at. But her pain really isn't any different than anybody else's. She doesn't have the background to, maybe the most difficult thing she's ever endured is having her tonsils out when she was 12. And
Right.
that's it, you know. And maybe she did great in school, and maybe she had friends, and maybe nobody's died yet. And,
Right.
so for her, that situation is absolutely as real as anybody else's pain because she doesn't have any calluses on her hands, you know?
Right.
It's their feet don't have any what are those things? Calluses, yeah, their heels or, and then there's other people that have had it so hard that like there's permanent stuff here. Like these calluses are never going away. They're so thick. Yeah,
Yeah.
because they've had to work that hard. So,
Yeah. All right. So let's talk about how do we get to a place of compromise? Like what is it that needs to happen when you're setting a boundary, the other person's setting a boundary, nobody's hearing each other, and you gotta get to that solution. Like,
mhm.
what are maybe some tips we can give our listeners for how to get there a little faster, you know?
Yeah. Well, and per our just discussion just now, people have different capacities.
Hmm.
So when we're dealing with boundaries are put in place to protect us and the relationship. But the way I go about doing that is going to depend on the capacity that I have. So somebody that is easily triggered, super sensitive, doesn't have
Mhm.
big capacity is gonna have that first boundary, which is I don't hang out for any conversations. I don't participate in conversation that's emotional at all for me or my partner. Somebody that has a large capacity might say, well, I'm not tipped over any longer. And I recognize the damage that this is doing to the relationship for my partner because they're staying stuck in their emotionality. So I might have a boundary in that space of, hey, let's talk about this when we can both be calm. But it isn't me anymore that's upset. It's just them, right? So we would have a different boundary. And then what if we're so healed that our boundary is I'm gonna let God rule my heart no matter what situation I'm in, unless I get emotional. That's my boundary. And so here's our partner that's really upset about something. And it's like, okay, tell me more about that. Well, you did this thing, and I have the capacity to be in that space and not take it personally. Not even though they're using you language, I don't make it about me. And so those early boundaries, they
Hmm.
don't exist there because I can ask them questions and I can help in that situation. So boundaries, they're kind of fluid, right? So there's that piece of it that's based on capacity. And you never know what somebody's capacity is in a situation. You really don't, because you don't know what's going to tip them over. So we just got to carefully walk through those places and just be patient and respectful as we're experiencing other people, and it may not be full on capacity as a human, but it might be my mother just died, or I just put my dog down, and today I don't have any capacity for literally anything. That's a thing.
That's the thing. And I think, gosh, we don't do enough of that because sometimes it's just that. Like you're just dealing with somebody that had a bad day
Hmm.
and the conversation could have gone in a completely different direction,
Yeah.
And but I mean, there has to be awareness, right? The person
Hmm.
has to be able to say, today's just not a good day, or I'm tired, or I had a big fight with my sister or brother. And
Hmm.
just like those are the things that make those conversations like so hard.
Yeah. 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 That's so true. And then you get into situations where the boundaries are in conflict because of values.
Yep.
Okay. So one of the most common ones that I've run into, and we're getting set, we're planning a little family vacation, and I'm going to be with people that stay up later than I do. You know, that's hard for me. I'm, going to be 60 in a couple of years. So I'm like, oh, okay, I need my sleep so I can be a person in the next day, right? And be cheerful the next day. And at the same time, I also know that I want to hang out with these people. So I need to navigate when this is gonna, what am I gonna do in that? Because I have a boundary that I'm in bed by 10, the end of it. Because I know what I'm like when I'm not.
Yeah.
I don't want to subject myself or others to that. So, but I'm guessing that on this trip, there's gonna be plenty of opportunity to be up past 10. What
Yeah.
do you do with that? And I'll probably find I know this, so I'm thinking about that as I go into it. My friends will be fine either way because it's not our first trip together. But what's also true is that I will probably make an active decision to change that for some of the time, right? Because I want to go do things with people. And I've actually got two trips in my head now because I'm doing a family thing and I'm doing a friend thing. And this can happen in both those places. So it's like, what can I do? Am I going to choose to stay up late? And this sounds like it's not a big deal, but those of you that know me well and have seen me before coffee in the morning know just what an extra extremely important this whole thing is for me. Sleep. Oh, anyway, and coffee. Yeah, it's all about that. So I'm going to move my boundary, but I'm not going to move it every night.
Yeah.
I might move it the first night and sleep in the next day or whatever. But what I'm not going to do is be angry at other people, right? Now, I'm not going to take it personally if I make a choice to go to bed early and I miss out and they tell me about it the next day. Oh, you missed out. I'll be like, oh, cool, good for you guys. I know what that's going to cost me. But
Right.
that's what being an adult is about, is you make decisions, right? And I know they want to hang out with me too. So I'm going to try to find some happy medium in that, and then I'm going to live with the decisions I make and not worry about it. That's hard for women, I think, but men are much better at that. But that's a thing. You have to be okay with what you decide.
Yeah, I just want to park right there because I'm listening to you and I'm like, I know there was a lot of work that you did mentally in that whole thing that most of us don't do, or we have to grow into that. And that's what I wanted to sort of highlight is you said you have to be okay with whatever it costs you,
Hmm.
even if it means something you might not have wanted to miss out on. Like, maybe they were playing a fun game and it's your favorite game, and you just pick that as the day where you just needed to go to bed early and you've already done the work to say, I'm gonna have to miss this. That right there helps you show up as a healthier version of yourself.
Hmm.
And so often we don't make that decision and then it creates more conflict and then we're mad at ourselves because
Yep.
of how we showed up in the situation when we could have did the work, in the front of it. And so, yeah, I don't know. Is that like something we're just gonna have to learn by trial and error, or is there some ways we can kind of get more awareness around, hey, I just need to like know that it's gonna cost me some time.
Mhm. Yeah, so to your point, that self-awareness thing, that is the hallmark of maturity, is you're self-aware about what it costs you, what it costs other people, and you navigate that. So, and I think probably the deepest work I did around this was I looked at my resentments. I sat down and I went, okay, what am I ticked off about? What am I resentful over? What am I harboring bitterness with? Why? Why is that? Where am I betraying myself? Where am I expecting other people to mother and father me, to take care of me, oh, we should all go to bed because we know Nina needs a good night's sleep. Like nobody ever said that to me ever. It was my responsibility to take care of me, right? And there's a child in all of us that wants to be mothered or fathered well, right? Even as adults, we get sick and it's like, somebody take care of me. you know,
Yes.
that's when it shows up a lot. But there's other places, and we know what those places are by the resentments and the bitternesses. And so we go, okay, where and it is a betrayal of self because at the end of the day, I'm responsible for the choices that I make. My yeses need to be yes. And if I'm saying yes because I'm afraid somebody's going to be upset with me, well, that's not mature. I need to go work through that. That is not awesome. If I'm feeling bitter because, well, I'm hanging, and I'm just going to make this up. My father's not alive, but let's say he was high maintenance and, well, I have to have coffee with him every Friday because if I don't, he's just going to be, whatever. It's like, wow, you really hate doing that. Why are you doing it? Like it's misery for you. Like what is that? And then how is that showing up? Because it'll show up in the relationship some way, shape, or form. And that's a betrayal of self, right? So instead of doing the thing you don't want to do,
Mhm.
figure out, well, what is that about? Why don't I want to do this? And it's really because, he just takes from me and talks about himself at the thing. And it's really just unpleasant. And he's incorrigible and brutally rude and judgmental and terrible company. And yet I'm forcing myself to go sit around that. Well, okay, so how about you change the conversation? Hey, Dad, I'm not going to make coffee Friday morning. Well, why is that? Well, it seems like it just makes you miserable. And I think I have enough of that in my life. So maybe we don't do this way anymore. How about we have lunch in a couple of weeks and we go fishing over our lunch hour? That would be fun. What would you think about doing something fun together? And he'll grumble over that, right? And so you start figuring out, well, how do I change this relationship? How do I take ownership and do
Right.
something different
Mhm.
instead of blaming other people for being the way that they are?
Mhm. Mhm.
And I'm and I don't pretend to be a genius, perfect model of this, but there's times where I just go to, I've got a couple of challenging people in my life for sure. And I just say, I need to hear something good right now because we've spent like 45 minutes just talking about how horrible everything is. And I'm like not motivated. Like this is not fun for me.
Mhm.
What's good? What's good in your life right now?
Right.
And I'll change that conversation. Um, And if it turns out that you can't change it long term or consistently, then maybe you spend less time because
Mm.
you're just reinforcing it's not good. Like all the research on complaining shows it's not good. And then there's the other things of, if I go over to my parents, then they expect me to work physically for 3 hours and, I'm sick and I still have to go do this. No, you don't. Hey, I can't make it today. Well, I needed you to, rake the leaves and bag them up and all that stuff. Yeah, I'm sorry. I'm not going to be able to do that this year. I think you're going to have to hire someone. The end. They'll be mad. They'll get over it. Yeah, be an adult.
You know, so I'm hearing that you do have to know yourself, and then once you know yourself, you set the boundary, and then you don't judge yourself for setting the boundary because
Right.
you're doing it for a good reason.
Mm.
What about on the other side of that? You're the other person setting the boundary. how do you look at, your person who's also setting a boundary and not judge them? Like that's also a thing. It's like there has to be awareness on both sides. It's like this is actually a healthy thing. I feel like the healthiest relationships are when you both can appreciate the boundaries that
Yes.
are happening, right?
Yes.
It's like,
Yes.
but that has to be like happening at the same time.
Yeah. So, and this is one of the things I tell our couples in the intensive is you have to respect the other person's boundary, even if it makes no sense, seems like, well, why are they doing that? Like they should be able to XYZ. Well, that's judgment. Stop it.
Right.
You know, honor what they've told you. They can't talk to you right now. They need to go take a walk around the block. Don't chase them. Let them go because nothing good's going to come from that. Okay, what you're seeing is their capacity. You can't change somebody else's capacity.
Mhm.
Let them be where they're at, give them grace, love them anyway. That makes it safer for them. And then that gives them space that's safe to take risk and grow, which is what you want. You don't want to push them further into their hole in defensiveness. You want to just receive whatever they're going to bring forth and choose to be okay with it. And then sometimes you can ask for more, absolutely. But if they say, no, I just can't do that, then you respect it. It's kind of
Okay.
like asking somebody to, hey, will you dive in the deep water and rescue Joe over there when they're like, I know how to dog paddle when I'm wearing a life vest. That's the extent of my swimming skills. And you're pushing them to go save somebody else. Like, are you nuts? Then two people drown. Like, don't do it.
Don't do it. I want to give an example of how this might look in a marriage. So, say you have a wife and she needs 9 hours of sleep.
Yep.
She- She's a vampire or a monster if she doesn't have 9 hours of sleep.
I feel I know this person.
Her husband is a morning person and he has to be up at a certain time to get out of the door.
Mm-hmm.
And when he gets up, he's noisy when he gets
Mm-hmm.
up, but he has to get up to get to
Yeah.
work on time. So
Mhm.
that's his boundary. She's got her boundary, but they're in direct competition with each other. How do you work that out?
Well, shotguns are good. For that.
Lawyers too, shotguns and
Yeah.
lawyers.
No, that was a joke. That was a joke. Now, I love this example because it's so real and I mean, in the big scheme of things, it's a small thing, but it affects so much. And
Mhm.
and I think it's hilarious you picked this because this is real. It's absolutely real. And sometimes you don't have a big enough house that you can just go to the guest bedroom and lay down while he's trying to figure out what shirt he's going to wear. You
Mhm.
know, and so in a healthy marriage, people know that about each other and they have a conversation. And
Mm.
so maybe he uses the guest room closet for his clothes
Mm.
and the bathroom down the hall, right? Matter of fact, Jim and I did that when we first got married and bought well, I guess it wasn't when we first got married, when we had our second house. Um, that's what happened. I mean, we had a nice big walk-in closet, but he used a bathroom that was down the hall so that like I've been this way for my whole life. It's just not changing. But he was so generous. And then now we're sharing a bathroom, but it's far enough down the hall it doesn't make a difference. But his clothes are in there, right? Well, I'm so thankful because he takes the dogs out and puts them someplace else so they're not waking me up. And then half the time he plans out what he's going to wear the night before. So he's not in our bedroom and noisy. But we've talked about that, right?
Right.
And if he does, need to search for something, he tries to be quiet. And I roll over and I put a pillow over my head and it's fine. Like we work through it and it's not a big deal. Um, I'm not going to remember anyway. So there's that. But if let's say that I was a lighter sleeper, I've got options. I can be furious with him and,
Mhm.
given the vampire that I would be, snarling and spitting, you know, the unfortunate thing is he would learn from that that I'm untenable in the morning. So there'd be a consequence to waking up the bear. Um, and I'm not going to say that it hasn't happened, right? What's interesting is that when an infant does that, there's compassion. There's no grumpy at the baby. So,
So we can do it if we want to.
yeah, we can. The Lord challenged me with that. He's like, how come you're so crabby with everybody else? You get older children, but you have a baby and you're fine with that. Like, what's that about? And I'm like, I'm gonna blame my reticular activating system on that. And your design. We'll say that. In a healthy relationship, you navigate that stuff. In an unhealthy one, it's just fight all the time,
Mm,
you know,
mhm,
and okay, I'm going to sleep in a different room because you're insensitive to my needs. Okay, sure. You can do that if you want to, or you could have a conversation. Hey, is there a way we could work out something win-win about this whole morning routine thing? I hate that I'm such a terrible person when I haven't had XYZ amount of sleep and no coffee and I get woke up and then I'm just the devil himself to you. I hate that I do that. You don't deserve that. Um, and I really would like to somehow stay asleep. Do you think we could navigate something that worked for both of us? Because I know you've got to get ready for work.
mhm.
And so can you have a conversation about something like that where the boundaries cross? And depending on your living situation, hopefully you would be able to work out win-win. I think you could. I really do. Worst case scenario, you work out win for you so you don't damage your partner or your relationship.
Yeah. Yeah. And preferably you can do it at a time where you're both in a good mood. Like
Exactly.
maybe not at that moment. When
Hello. Yeah. Yeah, that's never a good time when somebody's upset. You don't have a conversation when you're emotional.
and then I think also it's important to believe the best. Like surely he's not making noise intentionally to wake you
Right.
up, you
Right.
and you're not being mean intentionally, but
Right.
we tend to think you're doing this to drive me crazy, and usually not the case. Like,
Right. Right. They have other things better to do.
or they're just like in their own world.
Right.
Like you're really trying to get sleep. He's really trying to get ready for work, and it's like not even personal. It's not. You're not even a thought.
Exactly. Right.
Okay.
Not on purpose.
Not on purpose. Not on purpose. Okay, so I feel like we've kind of touched on a lot of things that would help our listeners. Is there anything else you'd like to add that, maybe would help us in this situation other than the amazing things you've already told us, like heal, don't get emotional, recognize differences in values, and then, talk at the right time to find that right solution.
Yeah, I think that, focusing on our own growth is really key to all of this and recognizing that as we grow, boundaries can move. We don't,
Mhm.
because we're not as sensitive, so we don't need all the boundaries, right? We get fewer and fewer of them. And as the relationship gets healthier, there's more compassion and care for the other that shows up. And so it makes it so much easier. It really does. So continue working on yourself, pray for your partner, and hope for the best because you got to know God's growing us in all of this, and that's par for the course.
Amen. All right. Well, what will you do with the information you have? We invite you again to check out our website. Also, we have an e-course on Facebook if you're interested in joining. It's a nice community of women where we also chat about the things we're talking about here. Also, we have plenty of episodes on our channel, so we invite you to check those out in your free time. And thanks for joining. We'll see you next time.